How's it going? It's Drew Blazik, and we are here to do the depreciation schedule. There will be 3 videos on it. So this video is going to be the basis to create it, and then the next 2 ones are going to be a little shorter, but we will do a different method in order to solve depreciation, how it's set up. Okay, so under the depreciation schedule, you want to um, under our lecture or video right here, you see the actual Excel file. You get to follow along what I'm doing here. Okay, I'm going to open it. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so I only have the schedules that are up that are important to the depreciation schedule. So let's just go through that real quick. Income statement. So that is important. I have a highlighted cell. That means depreciation. What we solve there will be directly inputted into the income statement. So we need that. Scroll down a little bit. Depreciation has to do with the cash flow statement. So we're going to input that in. What we solve in the depreciation, we'll input that there. Also the balance sheet. So we have net property, plant property, and equipment. That will help to solve it. It's not a direct, or not, I don't mean direct, but it's not just depreciation, but we're trying to solve what is our net property in equipment, what we have, plant property and equipment on the balance sheet. Remember, the balance sheet is a total amount. Cash flow statement is a cash flow amount. So it's real important to see. The income statement is a flow of some sort, right? We got to find that, what that is. So the cash flow statement and the income statement will be the same exact number. Then you want to think, is it a positive or a negative? And then we go down here in the balance sheet. This is a balance of some sort. So the depreciation will tell us how much is our plant, property, and equipment depreciating. So we have to find out what the total is. Okay, scroll down a little bit more. We got our depreciation schedule, and there's nothing else. So when you think of depreciation schedule, I want you to think about the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. The income statement is going to be a cost. The cash flow statement will be a cash flow amount. And again, we don't think about positive, negative, and then the balance sheet is a balance of our plant, property, and equipment that we must subtract out the depreciation. Okay, first off, we have to look at what it's asking for here. So we have these cells. This is going to be found in our assumptions. We have 2 different kind of depreciation. We have years remaining on existing assets, and then we got years on new assets or projected assets for the next 5 years. So I'm going to say equals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that in, and we have that depreciation right here. Our method is straight line, so that's important. So I'm going to select that cell and bring it in. So we got 25 years on that, and then I'm going to say equals. You could have dragged it down because right below it. So we got 25 on existing assets and 30 years on new assets. Okay, before we go forward, this is called the waterfall effect, right? Before we do it, I want to know, what is my depreciation from existing assets? That's the first thing that we want to calculate here. So what I'm going to do is say equals, and we want to know, so this isn't the new assets I'm going to purchase, but we had previous assets I still get to depreciate over time. So I'm going to say equals, I'm going to go all the way up to the balance sheet, okay? So I'm going to go to the balance sheet to figure out the existing. That's going to be our net fixed assets or our plant, property, and equipment. So we do not have the projected numbers, but we do have the last actual numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that. Now you could freeze it if you wanted to, or I'll show you another technique. So If you want to hit function F4 and put make it an absolute value, because this is existing assets. This is not the new assets. So we're just doing the previous year. And then what I'm going to do is divide it by, and we're going to depreciate it straight line by the remaining years. These are the remaining on existing assets. So it's going to be 15.9, which means since it's going 25 years and we have 5 years of projected, it's going to be 15.9 each year. So the remaining of what we have for existing, that's what we're going to decline per year. So if I made that an absolute value, I could have dragged it. Or you do what I did. I go to the next cell. I'm going to select the previous one. And now I get to drag it. So you could have done either one. You could have made this an absolute value, divide by 25, and you want to make that an absolute value too, and then drag it, or just solve it, go to the next cell, say equals, and drag it across. Okay, so this is going to be called a waterfall approach. And this is our CapEx on our new assets, the projected assets, what we're talking about. Well, our projected assets are found in a different areas. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer back to our assumptions page. Our assumptions page right here is our capital expenditure. This is what we will depreciate. If you remember from managerial finance or the advanced course, capital expenditure is the cost that it costs us today, right? This year. And then what we're doing is we're in the income statement, this does not exist. And if you remember when we do the free cash flow, we have to add we have to add back depreciation, and we have to say, okay, that was a cost, the capital expenditure. So this is the cost for each year. This is our projected amount. And what I want to do on the financial model, I want it to go down. So in our assumptions is horizontal, but now I want it to go down. There's 3 methods of doing it, and I'm going to do the easiest one. The easiest method is we're going to say equals in that first cell, and then I'm going to type in transpose. So all that does is take a horizontal, if you have data going horizontal, and it'll make it vertical. So I hit tab. So you want to do it really quick. The other method you can do, it takes a little longer. I'm going to hit transpose. I'm going to go to the assumptions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight those years. Highlight those years, and it automatically drags it down and transposes it down. That's the quickest way of doing it. Okay. Now here is a complicated equation that you need to practice this at least 5 times, and then once you do it 5 times, you'll get the hang of it, and you'll do it easily. So what we're going to do, now first off, this is an assumption that majority of all depreciation schedules will go by. First year of the asset it's called a half year rule. On average, you purchase your asset throughout the year. So we're saying in that first year that we're doing, it will be we're making an assumption that we purchase it halfway through the year, or throughout the year, we're making these capital expenditures. So if we depreciated that first year, the entire thing, that would be assuming we purchased it the very first day. So we're making the assumption that the first year is going to be half, and then the next year is going to be full. And then if I went all the way out, depreciation of net fixed assets for 30 years, if I went all the way out to the 30th year, that would be half as well. The very last year would be half. So the first and the last would be half, because we're making the assumption we're purchasing it within half the year. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this if function. So this is what you want to get used to memorize it. So, and I'll kind of explain it as we go. But the important thing on the exam is memorizing this equation. To make sense of it, it'll make sense when we do it, but they're not going to ask you questions how to do it. You just want to memorize it. So I'm going to type if, hit a tab, and I'm going to go back in. I'm not going to do dollar signs because I want this to be all the way filled out. So after I do the equation, I'm going to go back and explain with what reference we want to make an absolute dollar sign, or we want the cell not to move, or we want it to move horizontal but not vertical, for example. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to say, this is the beginning one, the if function. If this CapEx year, okay, is greater than, so if it's greater than this year, and this is our projected years, so we're saying if the year of the asset I have down here is greater than, that means it's outside of the projected year, okay? That means I'm gonna hit a comma, and then an if function is it means if this is true, so if this year is greater than this year, and now it's asking, after I hit the comma, it's asking what does it mean? If this is true, what do I want in there? What does that mean? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit 2 quotation marks. Okay, what that means is if this year is greater than this year, if 2023 is greater than 2022, which it is, I do 2 quotation marks. That means blank. There's nothing. We're not going to do anything. And the reason is I'm making one equation. I'm going to drag it to the right and drag it down to calculate all the values. So it makes sense. If 2026, right, that's when we do $18 million of capital expenditures. If that's greater than this year, I'm not going to depreciate it, right? So that's when we do that. So now I'm going to do is hit a comma. Now it's asking, what if it's false, right? First I said, if it's not in that year, if this year is greater, we're not going to calculate anything because it has not happened yet. Now it's asking, what if it's false, which means we are either are in the year or or less than the year, okay? It's not greater than. So now what I'm going to do, again, this looks complicated, but you get used to it. I'm going to start another if function. So if the year is equal to that year or less than the year, now this is what we're saying in here. If it's greater than the year, we're not calculating anything. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, this is if it's false, which means we're not greater than that year. I'm going to do the same thing. Now I'm saying is if this year is equal to this year, I want you to think what that means. If 2022 is equal to 2022, which it is, that means I want to do this rule of first year is always half. Okay? So now let's hit comma. So if it is in that year, I wanted to do the new asset. Okay? And again, I'm not going to do dollar signs. I'm going to go back into it. I don't know if that's a mistake, but I just want to go through it first. I just want you to think about this first year. So if it is equal or we're in that year, I want that divided by, so I'm going to hit the divided sign. So I'm doing the new asset for that year divided by 30 years. That's where we're going to depreciate. This is a straight line depreciation. All you do is take your capital expenditure and divide it by that 30, but we're doing half of it. So then I'm going to divide it by 2. Right? I think we're good. So again, if it's in that year, I'm going to take half of it. Now it's asking, what if we're not in that year? So let me reverse. That means this year is not greater. We're not going to calculate it. Now, if it's equal to, that means I'm taking half. Now, if it's less than that, I'm going to depreciate it fully, 100%. So that means I'm going to take the depreciation of the new asset, and now I'm going to divide it by the years for that asset, and then I'm going to close it, and that should. Now, I forgot a bracket. I'm going to open that up real quick. forgot to close another bracket. That's why I asked that. A lot of times they'll do it for you when it gives the error code. So I did the first year, which is correct. It's 0.3. That means if I took 16 million, divided it by 30, and then I divided it by a half in that year, that would be correct. So that first year, that's correct. Now, if I drag this across, this is not going to be correct. I'm going to get an error code. Now, if I go into it, the reason is I need this fixed, this moved, that needs to be changed. A bunch of things need to be changed. with the dollar signs to make it an absolute value. So let's go back into it. I'm going to open this cell. Now let's kind of work through it. I'm going to go from the beginning. So I said if 2022 over here is greater than 2022, our projected years. So I said if it's greater, so I want you to think about it. If this year, if I'm going to drag it to the right, I don't want it to drag to the right, right? So I want my letters absolute, a dollar sign in front of the letters. So I'm going to go in front of there. I'm going to hit Function F4, hit it again, and hit it 3 times. And that puts a dollar sign in front of the letter. I do not have one in front of the number. Why? Because when I drag that down, I want that equation to go to the next one down. Right? I put it in front of the column, but not the row. So I could drag it down. Now let's look at this year. This year is going horizontal, which means I wanted to drag when I go to the right horizontally, but I don't want when I drag it down, I don't want it to go down, right? So you just kind of have to look at this cell. Like I want it to drag to the right. So now I'm going to put Function F4 and hit it twice, which means I want a dollar sign in front of, in front of the row. I don't want it to drag down, but I do want it to drag to the right. So we did that. Well, the next one is we're doing the same years. If it equals. So I'm going to do the same thing. Function F4 3 times. So I'm putting the dollar sign just like that, right? I don't want to drag to the right, but I want it to drag down. And then right here, this one, I want it to put, I'm going to hit it twice. I want it in front of the row. All right, so far, so good. So now we're saying if it is equal, I'm taking that capital expenditure, which is the 16 million. Now you got to think about what do I want to fit, make absolute here. Well, I don't want it to drag to the right. If I drag to the right, it's going to do this cell. But when I drag down, I want it to do the next year. Then the next year. So I want to put a dollar sign in front of the letter. So I want it to drag down, but not to the right. The next variable, we divided it by the 30. So I don't want it to drag to the right or down. So I'm going to put an absolute value on both. And then that was divide by 2. Leave it there. So then if it is not greater than, and if it's not equal, then that means the year is less than. We're going to fully depreciate it. That means, again, that D 230 is the new asset. Right there, I want it to drag down, but not to the right. So I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of that letter. And then what it did was divide it by the 30 years. And I want to put a dollar sign in front of both. Because now if I go to the right, it looks like it's correct. So that's a good thing. All right, show you a quick little tip. And this is what I'm going to do here. And the reason, now Ian in the video FMI does not do that closed, that quotation. The reason why I like it closed is because when you go in here, it's not going to show anything. It's going to make it look perfect, in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit a copy, Control C. You could drag it to the right, drag it to the left, but it's going to drag all that gray with it, and I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I hit Copy C. I copy that cell. I'm going to hit Alt ESF. Alt ESF. And I want it to copy only the formula, not the formatting. So it's going to copy the formula, and I'm going to hit Enter. Look at that. So beautiful. And it did it perfectly. And it actually has an equation in there. And the reason why it's blank is because if it is greater, if that year is greater than that year, which 2025 is greater than 2022, it's left blank. So that's what it looks like. All right, next step is I'm just going to sum up these values. So I'm going to hold down Shift. I hit equal sum, and I'm going to highlight all the way up. So what I want to do is I wanted to have the calculation on the depreciated assets of the new assets purchased every year. And I also want to calculate the asset or the depreciation of the existing assets. So I'm just going to add both those in, and that's going to be our depreciation. All right, now we filled it out. Now all we have to do is go up and do some calculation. I'm going to leave this one for last. This is the hardest one. I'm going to do the two easiest. So again, let's think this through. Depreciation, when you solve it, it goes into the income statement, it goes into the cash flow statement, and it goes into the balance sheet. So first, let's do this. This is the income statement. Now, if you remember, the income statement depreciation is negative, but we count it as a positive. And when we did the calculation, oh, can't show it. When we do this calculation here, we just, oh, it's locked as well. I locked it so you can reset it. We're just subtracting it. So I want you, all you have to do is look at, okay, on the income statement, it's listed as a positive. So I'm just going to import that in as a positive. Okay, pull that in. That's correct. I already had the calculations, right? So that you can see up here what I did was this minus the depreciation. So all we did, bring in the depreciation. Now we got to do the cash flow statement. I want you to think, what is the cash flow statement? Cash flow statement, this is our free cash flow, how much money we actually have. So what this is net income. And then what are we going to do? We're going to add back in depreciation, because depreciation was never a cost, because we technically subtracted it in the income statement. It was never a cost. We have to add it back in on the cash flow statement. So I'm going to say equals, and then I'm going to add it back in. Go across, Control R. And look at that. Just made our entire cash flow correct, our income statement correct. And we are almost there, 99.5 and 98.7%, but our balance sheet is not balanced, because the last item, we will use depreciation to figure out our net plant, property, and equipment. And what we want to do here, we have to think this through, is how much do I have? Well, I still have a 397.7 million of plant, property, and equipment. So I'm going to bring that over for the next year, and then I'm going to subtract out the value of depreciation, because that's what our assets, our net fixed assets, decline by value. You have a car that was brand new, is worth 50,000. You drove it for a year. Now it's worth 40. So it declines. We have to put that on the balance sheet. So we subtract out depreciation, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add. Okay, I'm going to add in our capital expenditures. Right, that's going to increase our net fixed assets, our net plant, property, and equipment. So again, I take the previous, I'm adding in capital expenditures, and I'm subtracting out depreciation, how much it depreciated by. Have it go across. Just double check, it is 100%. That's 100%. We are good to go. And again, once you get that done, you can hit the reset button. You know what? I got to fix that. It's not working. Anyways, I'll get that fixed for you. Hit the reset button. That will reset all those values there. And then you'll be all set. So, hey, any questions, let me know. God bless, and I'll see you in class.